camera rolling?
Yes. Do you have slides or anything, Aaron? Or?
No, sir.
Okay. I think this is an informal fireside chat, if you will.
Chat.
A little bit of distance between everybody, but that's probably where we are today. It's probably not a bad thing.
No.
So, okay. Yeah. Go ahead whenever you like.
And now...
I would introduce you, but I think you better do that yourself.
Thank you, Chef.
You're welcome.
I'm Aaron Warren, and I'm the CEO of ProCircular Cybersecurity and Compliance firm. And today we have three gentlemen who know a lot about cybersecurity because they are on the receiving end of some of the worst sorts of bad guys. And I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves. So when you introduce yourselves, let's get a little bit of a bio. And then if you had a boat, what would the name of that boat be? So you win the lottery, buy your yacht, what name goes on the back of your brand new yacht and why? Jon Neff, go.
Well, thank you, Aaron. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm Jon Neff. Work for Kirkwood Community College. I'm the CIO there. Been there for about 16 years. Prior to that, worked for MercyCR, a telecommunications company that used to exist and doesn't anymore. But great place to get a start there. So my boat, I would call it peace and serenity because I think my daily life probably doesn't typically have that. And I am a big boater and fisherman, and that's what I like to seek out, I guess, in my spare time. So I'll hand it over to Joel.
I'm Joel Miller, Linn County Auditor and Commissioner of Elections. I have been in that role for 14 plus years. Before that, I was the IT Director for Four Oaks of Iowa, children's and family service organization that is throughout the state of Iowa. And the name of my boat, wow, several things come to mind. Help is on the way? No. Hallelujah? I don't know what I'd pick for a boat name. I'm not much of a boater or a fisherman right now.
Gabe Kimbrough. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Mercy Hospital in Cedar Rapids. I've been there for 5 years. If I had a boat, the name, I guess I would go with No Regrets. Because I hope when I get to the end that I don't have anything to say I have regrets about. So that's kind of, yeah, not no regrets like the bad tattoos. So yeah.
So to kick us off a little bit here, you guys are from three pretty different industries, right? Education, government, and healthcare. And as a result of that, you attract some different sets of challenges from a cybersecurity perspective. So what would you say is unique about the industry or the area that you work in terms of cybersecurity and compliance? What's different about what you do?
Yeah, I'll kick that off. So in education, particularly higher education, it's really open. So you think about your students, you think about your guests. We're the communities college is kind of one of the taglines. So we accept everybody on our campuses. We have 7 different locations. Our main campus is in Cedar Rapids, but we have another campus in Iowa City that's pretty sizable, and then some smaller ones in our counties. And being that communities college means that you're going to provide them with particular services. So it's really a challenge. It's not like where I used to work where you badge in or they pull a gun on you and say, nope, you're out of here type thing. They wouldn't really pull a gun on you, but they wouldn't let you in if you didn't have a badge, didn't sign in, didn't have some sort of reason for being there. Versus community college, any college. K-12s are a little bit different now, with resource officers and locked doors, and you've got to go to the office if you're going to go visit someone. But we remain really open, so that's definitely a challenge. I would say maybe one of the unique ones for us.
Well, one of my duties as the Auditor and Commissioner of Elections is I run elections in the second largest county in the state. And I think in 2016 presidential election was probably the last year that I would say was normal in elections. But it turned out it really wasn't normal. We found out a couple of years later, probably 2018, 2019, that there was attempts to hack into election systems in the country. Iowa was one of the targets. They did not get anywhere with it. And now we move forward to 2021, five short years from 2016, and we spend a lot of time focusing on, are we secure in everything that we do? And we're spending more money on it. And we thought that in 2020 that we were going to be a target for hacks, but it turns out that what the biggest problem that we have right now is disinformation in elections. And we can see that is equally as big of a problem as anyone hacking into anything, because now everyone's an expert on elections and on what we do, and they think they are, and they approach us, me and my 98 fellow auditors, from that perspective, that they know more about it than we do, because they've read something that somebody's doing, and they want to know if we're doing the same thing or what we did differently. So we're really under the microscope. I always knew we were, but we really are now in this present day.
Thank you. Well, let's see, healthcare. Some differences with healthcare that you might not have in some of the other organizations. Number one and foremost in healthcare, we're there to provide a service to our patients, right? So our job is to meet regulatory requirements and ensure that the information availability is there to provide that patient care and everything like that. That's one piece of that. HIPAA is a regulation that we are required to follow. So that kind of drives a lot of our direction and some of the requirements, and then how we interpret HIPAA to provide those services and make sure that they're as secure as they can possibly be. Outside of those things, some other things that are different in healthcare from my previous jobs is biomedical equipment. That brings in a whole new risk just by the nature of how biomedical equipment makes it into your organization. For instance, we have policies and procedures for vendors to come on site to try out new biomed equipment. So we have to be aware of things that might be connected to our network and make sure that we're allowing that to happen in a secure manner while doing security reviews for those pieces of equipment to make sure that they do maintain HIPAA compliance, so that we're protecting not only our patients' health but our patients' information.
Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Let's get a fun one in here. And I warned these guys ahead of time I was going to ask this question. So we'll call it Chatham House rules here. We're all friends. None of this could be public or end up in the press.
Right.
And it's being recorded. So how about a war story? So can you tell a story about an attack or an incident? Doesn't necessarily have to be a breach, right? It doesn't have to be reportable, but what's one time when either the hair stood up on the back of your neck or it was kind of all hands on deck? And can you share with these guys what that experience was like, what you sort of went through?
Yeah, not your funnest day, right? From that perspective. So the one I'll share with you guys, probably fairly common, 4 or 5 years ago. And this one went to an office that's responsible for payroll. I'm not going to say which office that is, but anybody who works in an organization can figure that out. It came to one of our folks that was inexperienced with actually processing payroll and kind of a newer employee. And it came from our president. And it was very kind of informal and chit-chatty, which was very interesting because that's how our former president was. And it said, hey, I need to get some information out immediately to the state. I'm at a conference right now. and I need all of everyone's personal information, including their salaries and SSNs and things of that nature. So this person was, you know, dutifully doing what the president asked her to do. I shouldn't have. What the president asked them to do, and at that point, they were smart enough to ask one of their peers, "How do I transmit this? This is going to be a really big file." And one of their peers said, "What are you talking about? Why would you ever transmit something like that?" And you know, so they got to the bottom of the story, found out, you know, that this was coming from our president. Looked a little bit more at the email, looked underneath it. Of course, it wasn't coming from our president. It was coming from someone impersonating the president. So they did shut that down, and we had some really good training for folks after that, particularly for those that we call our VIPs. So that's anybody in finance that can mess around with money, anybody in HR that can mess around with money, anybody obviously in IT, you know, special access, that type of thing. So they get extra training, all of them, and that was something that was an eye opener. Thank goodness it didn't result in any harm to us, but you know, definitely one of those things that, oh my gosh, I'm glad that, you know, I don't know. Am I glad that this happened? Yeah, I guess so. I'm glad that it didn't, you know, turn out to be anything. But it was a great experience, and it was something that kind of showed us. You know, I'll get into this later, I think, too. But it's how important having those people that you work with have good knowledge of systems and security. So that was, I guess, our story. Again, had a happy ending, maybe not so much for the person that, you know, almost spilled the beans, but yeah, it definitely was something that was an eye-opener for us.
And we'll start to mention that Kirkwood, KIRWW.
Well, one of the functions that the auditor's office does is accounts payable. We are the accounting department for the county. We have about 800 employees. So one of the things we encounter is that, like most companies, we do direct deposits. So we have payroll authorizations. We have people giving us their direct deposit slips and wanting to change bank accounts. And most of those are legitimate, but we get illegitimate ones as well, and thankfully we've caught all the bad ones that originate from who knows where, trying to get us to change to a bank account of somebody that doesn't work there. On elections, as I illustrated before, the disinformation is really the problem we have now. Now, if you're following election news and what's going on in Maricopa County, Arizona, the word of the day is forensic audits. We're getting requests, and I just got one this week. We noticed some anomalies on the Secretary of State's website, and we would like to investigate that and conduct a forensic audit of this data. Now, they weren't explicit as to what the data was. They didn't define it very well, but in tracing back this potential person, it looks like this person may be involved in some lawsuits of some sort. We don't have a definition of what a forensic audit of elections is in the state of Iowa. You may have in your mind what forensic means, but that doesn't mean it's what I think it means. And we do a post-election audit after every election now anyway. So we would have to write a new law that says we're going to do forensic audits. And everyone would have to, the legislature would have to agree upon what that really is, along with election officials.
All right. I hate to sing the same tune here. This question is, can be kind of sensitive. So the fact that we're on camera and going to change my answer here a little bit. So I want to talk about an instance that we had that kind of speaks to security controls and the fact that when you put out security controls or create security controls, you need to have more than one, right? Because if you have one single point of failure, odds are at some point that's going to fail for you. So we had a similar instance where one of our VIPs was targeted with a phishing scam, and so this started, it went to payroll, it went to HR, it was coming from, you know, one of the top guys in the organization. So anytime that happens, you know, you receive that, you want to be very helpful, right? So they kind of dropped the processes that they should have been following, which is to follow up, have them actually come fill out paperwork to change your payroll. So they bypassed that. Now, luckily, we had an additional control with the vendor company that does our payroll, and they were able to, before they make a change, their process was they have to call and speak to that VIP personally. Well, they did that, and obviously, you know, I get the phone call, what is going on here? So they caught it, they didn't do it, but it speaks to those controls. Outside of that, you know, that was a very good learning lesson for everyone internally, because everyone at that point understood why those processes were in place, why they were important, and you know why security is always hounding you to follow those processes, and the importance. And it's been super beneficial because this year, last year, I guess we started receiving, and we're not the only people in the state of Iowa, but a scam around unemployment, right? So HR receives that scam that says, hey, we got this unemployment benefit for so-and-so. This time they follow the processes and they realized very quickly that this was a scam. These people still work for us. So obviously not it. We spoke to, you know, the state investigators about it, and they assured us, you know, that this information isn't coming from you. You know, they told us where they thought it was coming from, and it's impacting organizations all over Iowa. So I'd be shocked if the people in this room probably haven't heard about that scam that's happening. But it is still happening. We still see those trickling in. We're probably down to a couple a month now. But yeah, I can't stress enough having those controls in place and more than one control, you know, to beat those bad guys.
Yeah, I'll just tag on. One sec, I'll just tag on to that a little bit. Sometimes those simple or kind of, you know, 2D solutions for the controls are as important as the really elaborate ones. So having that extra call-in check, and that's actually one of the things we have for making payroll changes too, is really good.
Oh, you had a question? We're top 3 in the country in terms of, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when you look on the dark web. We have clients that will ask us occasionally if there's a credit card breach. They'll ask us to go poke around and see what we can find. And personal identity, especially if it's relatively fresh, those go for, I don't know, $5, $15 a pop, give or take. Medical IDs, so if you get a copy of somebody's medical record from an EHR system, those can go for between $150 and $300 a pop. And what a lot of the bad guys will do is use that. They'll go get a prescription at like 6 or 7 different shady pharmacies for oxycodone. And then they get somebody to go in and pick up the 90 pills a week, and they sell each of those pills to some poor person who is addicted to opioids for $100 a pop. And yeah, that's where a lot of those identities end up. Sure.
So, look, I was one of those people that all of a sudden I had the HR calling me saying, or be like, hey, did you file for unemployment? Like, hey, you want some work here? You want some case? Like, no.
Do I still work here?
Exactly, do I still work here? But the benefits are coming to me. What was the hackers or whoever run an employment office in the state of Illinois. Because the benefits were going to the hacker, they were going to me. Well, as far as I know, I mean, what was the purpose, I guess, is part of my question.
My guess would be that they didn't finish the second half of the project where they redirect those funds to their own account. They didn't get that far. They got the first part of the job done. What do you guys think?
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, they got halfway there.
They've got typically different teams that are set up. You know, one of them's going to go out and do maybe the first part that we talked about. Another one is set up to handle all the wire transfers, or let's go to like a Bucks credit card, or something like that. They've got all those things lined up. So I would agree, I think, with the consensus there. But yeah, certainly in your position, I would wonder too. I'm like, how the heck did they even do that? Take that risk if it's not going to them. But that would make sense. Just like any organization has specialists, they do too, and it's scary. I mean, I always, back before all this stuff became very prevalent, would always think, oh, it's like one person sitting in their mom's basement doing all this crap. They're very sophisticated, and they have specialty teams that kind of perform each one of those different roles. So, yeah.
So we would want me to call and say that.
Yeah, he said to his buddy, like, who are you? Well, I'm the guy who does my job. Yeah. You didn't do your job. We've seen that too, where they've divided some of, especially the Russians, those cartels have gotten complex enough that they actually divide the labor up. So you have your negotiations guy, you have your the transfer, the guy who handles the money, and then you've got the actual hacker that introduces the malware in. In some cases, you'll see in some of the IRs, incident response that we do, one of the first steps is to figure out who else has been invited to the party. Because what they'll do is take down like a school or a bank or a government or a hospital, and they'll use it for what they're going to do, and when they're done, they'll go sell the keys to somebody else and say, hey, I've got access to a bank, 10 grand, and I'll sell you the login and password and all the IPs that you need. So sometimes in an incident, you have to figure out, like you may have 2 or 3 people invited to the party. It makes things quite a bit more complicated.
In the case of ransomware,
You would probably know this better than me, but supposedly in the case of ransomware, they actually have a customer service department as well to ensure that they can handle the transactions and get the end result they want.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch? They're multiple languages, all kinds of stuff. They have call centers in India that'll do just about, they'll read any flip book that you send to them. I wanted to try and do this panel in a way that wasn't like, let's regurgitate the same stuff that you saw in the New York Times or the Verizon breach report again. So I'd like to talk about what's a little bit different, right? Because everybody who's sitting here, like you're at a hacker conference, so you've already probably figured out that this is kind of the thing. So what would you say that people get wrong about what you do? Like, what are some of the misconceptions about the jobs that you have? Like, what do you wish people knew about what your work in security looks like? Other than it's not like NCIS. It's like, wait a minute, I almost took the firewall. Okay, I'm in. Like the cool Hollywood stuff. What's the thing that you kind of wish people knew about the security aspect of your job, or a common misconception?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And this would even go back to kind of my mindset before kind of knowing more about it. And I am an enthusiastic learner of cybersecurity. By no means am I an expert, so I feel a little bit unqualified up here. So I'll leave that from that standpoint. But I think the thing that I've learned the most, about it, that I think people may think it's different, is it's not all about the infrastructure side. I mean, certainly you want to have a good, strong infrastructure, But a lot of it is about the people that you work with and their knowledge and their ability to spot things that aren't right, spot things that, may be an issue, and then come up with kind of on their own or with help, asking a neighbor, a friend by them, hey, this doesn't look right to me. Are you kind of looking at this the way I'm looking at it? So that skepticism, I think, is something that us kind of Midwestern, Illinois, Iowa, nice people don't have a lot of, and we need more of. Probably the things that we were talking about before wouldn't have happened maybe as easily, gotten to the point that they did. Certainly, none of them were catastrophes. But if you're in New York, I mean, those people are like, I'm not switching, this for you. Give me some information, write it down on a piece of paper. But the Iowa nice people are like, oh, geez, that's my boss's boss. I need to, kick in and pay attention to this and take care of it for him. So I think I definitely had underestimated the power of kind of getting everybody trained up, getting them all to a certain level of, kind of what's going on out there. Maybe not being, an expert, but being smart enough about what they're doing on a daily basis, with their network credentials, with their email, with, the things that they're responsible for. And I think without that, it's a lot more dangerous. If a lot of the folks that we support, until we kind of engage with them, so if somebody new coming from somewhere else thinks, oh, IT, you guys got this cybersecurity thing. Oh no, my friend, we have this cybersecurity thing, and you're going to help us because you're going to be out there kind of scanning and patrolling and paying attention to stuff and letting us know. I mean, that's one of the ways that we get stronger is we have all of the things that get reported, come into a central dispatch, and we get to look at those trends. We get to find out what's going on. We get to, investigate that ticket and close it. So if somebody was just kind of out there going, oh, IT stuff will take care of this, not so much. There's got to be that collaboration. There's got to be understanding, and there's got to be somebody with kind of an inquisitive mindset as an employee to be able to kind of help us in that. So that's kind of what I've got.
Well, as I said,
Any misconceptions around election security control?
a few. If you strip away my title and everything, what it comes down to is that me and people like me throughout Iowa, throughout Illinois, throughout the nation, we're administrators of American democracy. We do our jobs to ensure that the supporters of the loser accept the results of the election. We just want to do a good job. We want to be the referees in the football game that you don't pay any attention to because they made all good calls and nobody notices them. That's how we used to be. And we did our jobs and we were secure. But as I said, in 2016, we found out probably in 2017 that people tried to hack into election systems in Illinois and other places. So we got ready for the election in 2018. We heightened our awareness and tried to look at every vulnerability we had. We did the same in 2020 and got ready. And to my knowledge, there were no breaches that occurred. But as I said, the disinformation campaign took over. And what I think that people don't realize and just need to be reminded of is that the people running elections, my office, I have 160,000 residents in 160,000 voters in Linn County. We're the second largest. Polk County's at 320,000 voters. My permanent staff is 5 people. We don't run the election. We have to go out and hire up to 600 people to run the election on election day. Those are Democrats, Republicans, Libertarian, Greens, and no party people. Those are our neighbors. from each of the precincts that we have in the county. Every county in Iowa is the same way. We hire people, your friends, your neighbors. And in fact, if you wanted to be a part of that, I'm sure you could go to your county auditor or your election administrator or wherever you're at and volunteer to work on election day if you have some doubts as to what goes into keeping election secure and running that election. And they would welcome that help because there's a shortage. If you haven't noticed when you go in to vote, most everybody is 60 plus years of age. I like to say that they're chronologically gifted, but they're doing it because they feel a patriotic duty to work that election. So elections are not run by some Russian cartel. They're run by your neighbors. And we did have at one time a lot of trust in the process. And the disinformation has destroyed the trust and is destroying our democracy. And I'm here to counter that. I'm here at every step of every day trying to counter that disinformation. And it requires us to be, our antidote to that, I believe, is transparency. Government is supposed to be transparent. Elections are supposed to be transparent. I try to make my office as transparent as possible. I want you to know everything about it. That's why we have public tests of our voting machines. That's why we have observers. We want to increase the trust and remove the disinformation that's surrounding us now that is not founded on fact, but is founded upon somebody decided to make up a lie. And people are buying into it. And that's a problem for us all. Yes, sir.
I totally agree. I find it interesting that you're hacked in a different sort of way. Instead of your systems being hacked, a lot of this, I work in intel, is that the same foreign adversaries that hack education and healthcare started a lot of this information that has sort of hacked the minds of my friends and neighbors and caused a problem. It's a different form of hacking. It's a different form of cybersecurity we're not used to. And we're not used to it. People you know that grew up in Eastern Europe, they're not used to the former Soviet Union. We haven't lived that life, but a lot of that is the exact same form that created this problem.
So the comment wasn't, I don't know that the camera picked that up, that yes, the social media and the information and the people that were focused on hacking us electronically are now hacking us via the media and putting out that information. And yes, that's our threat now. But that can flip. They can pivot in 2 years. And in 2022, they'll go from, yes, they're doing the disinformation, but now they're also attacking our systems and trying to find that one error that somebody, came in and breached a voting machine. There's probably only a couple thousand in Iowa. And that's going to make the news, they breached it. It's just like the comments made about the different voting machine manufacturers. I mean, it's out there, it's very harmful, and we use paper ballots in Iowa, and so, as people say, it's really hard to hack paper. So I'll pass it along, because I could go on a long time about this. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have two answers for this question. One of them is going to be healthcare specific, but the other one's, I think, it's more of a general statement, but it's, I think, one of the most important. So anytime we have a new hire class that starts, I go down and I speak to the new hire class, and the one thing that I tell them is that we have a lot of great security tools that we're using to help protect our patients and you. But the best tool that we have is sitting right in front of me. Security awareness, what you guys are going to bring to the table, I don't have any tool that can beat that. And the reason that is our two biggest attack vectors, right? Phishing emails and surfing the internet, right? A lot of bad things can happen doing those things. So we have a lot of tools that we help protect, but we can't protect against everything. And plus, you have to go home too, right? You have the internet at the house. So everything that you're going to learn, that we're going to teach you to increase your security awareness is not only going to benefit us and our patients, but also yourself. So I think that has to be said. I truly believe that's one of the biggest security things that we have. Now, healthcare specific answer, I want people to know how much work goes into protecting your PHI, right? That's the most important data that we have at the hospitals. PHI is personal healthcare information, right? Protected healthcare information is personal healthcare information. So we spend a lot, and that's why you have the HIPAA rule, right? Because the government wants to make sure that we're doing that. Now the HIPAA rule, while it's great in its entirety, it doesn't tell you what to do, right? You have to interpret what you think that it needs you to do, right? Now luckily we have other frameworks that we apply that on top of to get to the security that we need, like this cybersecurity framework, for instance. So I think it's very important that people realize that. And effective July 1st, 2021, the Inoperability Act was rolled out. What that is that's the basis of that is that healthcare has to make your personal information very available to you. So what I mean by that, and maybe some of you have already seen this, maybe you're sitting in the hospital room and you have MyChart, right? You just took a test, you're waiting for the doctor to come in and tell you the results of that test. If you log into MyChart now, you're gonna know the results before that nurse walks in, right? And that's created some heartache for the nurses and the doctors because, you know, maybe it's information that they want to provide to you in a particular way because, you know, the impact it might have on you. So that's one impact, but the other impact is that we have to provide your information, we have to provide it to you when you want it, right? So if you want to have your health care information come through on Apple Healthcare app or something like that, you know, the one thing that the act doesn't tell you is that HIPAA doesn't apply across the board, right? So just because the healthcare agency is responsible for providing all the HIPAA security, that app might not be under the same regulatory requirements. So they might not be providing the same protection. So if there's one thing that I think people misunderstand, especially when it comes to sharing information or providing access, is that just because you have access to do something with your information, you might be changing the actual security around it by doing so. So if anyone's going to take advantage of that, which there's a lot of positive things with this app, I'm not saying they're not, but the one thing it doesn't spell out the risk that it creates is as it relates to the security of your personal information. So those would be the two things that I would want people to understand.
I'll ask one more question. We're at 3:45, and then maybe any questions we've got in here. What are your priorities? So when you look in, let's say, the next 3 years or so, when you think about where cybersecurity is going and how things are changing over time, and kind of what you think. I mean, to the degree any of us know what tomorrow holds, but what are your priorities when it comes to security in the coming years, in the next, let's say, the next 3 years? What's kind of top of mind for you guys in terms of what things you're going to change or introduce to deal with the threats you see coming?
Yeah, that's a big one because things come at us so quickly. But I see Brandon back there, and he's told us this for a year, and we definitely pay attention to Brandon. He's our CISO for our college and does a great job for us. But one is two-factor for everything. So people are very used to that now. We do have that in lots of situations, but not everything. So when I say everything, I mean everything. I'm talking about apps that students use, apps that adjunct faculty use. I'm talking about all of those things. So it's a bigger ask, particularly for higher ed, than it would be for somebody that's getting a paycheck from a company. Because these students are kind of like, well, why is Kirkwood asking me to do two-factor? You know, that seems weird, but we have a pretty good answer. It's going to help you become more secure. It's going to help us be more secure. So, you know, it's less convenient, but sometimes security is, you know, the antonym for convenience from that standpoint. You just have to kind of work that way. Trying to think of another thing that we've got. We're kind of rebolstering our backups as well as our disaster recovery process. So when you think about a derecho coming through and hitting very close to your primary data center, that kind of gets things amped up around that. So president said, here's some money, go make this happen. Because, we talked about it since she's been there for 3 years, and very big supporter around that, but we've always had other priorities. Sometimes, I got a proper data center because of an ice storm about 14 years ago that took out all the electricity for Linn County and some of the surrounding counties for about 4 days. And thank goodness it wasn't around a time when it's a peak enrollment, because I monetized it and I shared it with our president's cabinet and said, this is what would have happened if even 10% of the people who were going to enroll couldn't have enrolled during that time frame. And it was millions of dollars. So have a little ounce of protection worth that pound of cure is pretty important from that standpoint. And I would say the last one is a little bit of a cop-out because I don't know what I don't know about this, but it's to stay open and stay flexible. I think that's something that really has served us well to this point, is really staying open-minded, staying flexible to things that are presenting themselves out there. Once we see something that's going to really make a difference, to execute on it. And we've had a pretty good track record of being able to get money because we can make a good case around that. Some of my peers, not so much. I mean, it's difficult. We compete really with making education potentially better, for our students with that money. But the way I kind of spin it is, look, if we have a big breach or we have something that's taking time away, then your students aren't going to learn, like for a couple of weeks. Go ask DMAC. And sorry, Mark, I love you, but that was a challenge for him and a challenge for that community college. And for us to be down for 2 weeks during like a peak time, I'd be updating the resume and doing other things. Maybe I just hit the checkout button at that point, because that would be very, very difficult for anybody. But certainly it wouldn't be something we would want to entertain. So we're trying to stay one step ahead and doing the best that we can.
Well, I would categorize this as a circle of control. Maybe you've heard circle of control, influence, concern, and I've added a fourth one, noise. But circle of control, what do I control as a county auditor? Speak the truth to the lies, make us as transparent as possible, try to be as responsive to the public as possible to answer the questions about elections and cybersecurity and so forth. We have also, my office has also partnered with our IT. I don't have a separate IT group. I have an IT group that takes care of our election equipment, but I don't control IT for the county of Linn. But we do partner with them. When we were able to get grant funds earlier last year, I gave a lot of money to the IT department to increase the security of the entire county system as a safeguard to partner to also protect elections. Other things that I could influence are, try to help smaller counties. There's 98 other counties. Try to help them. Some of those offices are 3 or 4 people in the smallest counties. Adams County is the smallest county in Iowa, 2,800 voters. But they still have a county auditor, and they do the same functions as we do, only with a staff of 3 or 4 people in that county. But they have to they have to be just as vigilant as we do in the larger counties where our IT department for the county is 20 plus people in it. So it makes a difference. On the state level, particularly in Iowa, and I have made this a public issue, is that our voter registration and election administration system was created in 2004. That's not to say that it is insecure, but it's dated. And there's probably technologies that exist today and software that can be written today that is more secure than what was written and done in 2004. So from a statewide basis, I'll continue to lobby to ensure that that system, which is centralized in Iowa and is supposed to be centralized in every other state in the union, but in Iowa is as secure as possible because I rely upon that. If that system's corrupted, my voters are corrupted, my voter registration is corrupted. So it's all about the weakest link in the chain and making that weakest link stronger and stronger and stronger.
Thank you. Two things jump out to me that we're going to spend time focusing on. Obviously, it's a loaded question because, continuous improvement in all areas, increasing automation is always going to help make you more secure and things like that. But last year was a pretty difficult year. A lot of things, with COVID, and we saw a lot of staff move to work from home. We weren't a company that was expecting that. So we met the challenge, but that's something that, when you ask people to start coming back into the office, now you have to start rethinking things, right? So a lot of staff, especially in IT, have the ability to work from home. So do you make them come back in the office? That's a decision that you have to make. I think most companies are going to be forced to start supporting more work from home. So I think as security, especially at our hospital, we're going to support that, which means we have to start figuring out what's the best way we can secure those work from home staff, still, getting into our network and in the best and most secure possible way. Some of the threats, that brings is, what about the home network? How is that secure? I don't have any visibility into your network at your house. So those are things that I think that we're going to focus on, and I don't think that's unique to healthcare. I think every company is probably going to have to focus on that, and it might be something they haven't thought about, but in the next 5 years, it's definitely going to be top of the list. The second thing that I think is top of the list that personally we're focusing on, because I think it's an area that we've seen really exasperated with the SolarWinds hack and Microsoft, right? These are third parties that the majority of people use that have a lot of high-level credentials and are already in your network. SolarWinds was, pretty scary stuff. But how are you going to handle that? So supply chain management, that's something I think organizations haven't focused on. So how are you going to increase your security around supply chain management? And we're looking at actually creating a new role whose job is to manage supply chain management. And so what that means is, are we doing the security reviews up front when we're bringing on a new vendor, right? That's super important. And then secondly, how are we managing their access? How do we know when those vendors leave the organization and that we're cutting off access correctly? There's a lot of tools out there that you can use to help you accomplish those things, but a lot of companies probably don't have those in place, because until last year with SolarWinds and Microsoft, it wasn't, again, another thing that wasn't top of the list that I think has very quickly gotten themselves to the top of the list. So I think not only us, but I think a lot of companies are going to start focusing on those two things going forward.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for your time today. Thanks for coming out. Hopefully you're doing okay at the tables after this. Are there any questions from anybody in the room? Please, sir.
So I really enjoyed your story.
Amazon would like to know. And the dilemma is, government agencies seem to operate as silos. And if you guys could get your IT groups together to put a shield around it to protect my information, that would make me feel much more secure. And I have access, to the city council and the county people and the township people, and they listen to me. And maybe not pass laws, but I get to understand what's happening. And so, in a way, yes, the CIA is nice, the federal government's nice, but if you could all work together to be more productive of your citizens, we may find that is a good leader. Thank you.
right, gents. Well, thank you for taking the time today. It's good to see you again, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the conference.